Welcome to the channel The Coins Explorer, and let me ask you something that might just change your life. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? What if I told you that one single penny, sitting in an old jar, tucked away in a drawer, or even jingling around in your spare change could be worth an absolutely staggering $447 million? Yes, you heard that right. $447 million for a coin that looks almost identical to any other penny you've ever seen. This isn't science fiction, this isn't a fairy tale, this is the incredible, mind-blowing reality of the 1944 wheat penny, a coin so valuable that finding one would instantly transform you into one of the wealthiest people on the planet. And before we dive deep into why this particular penny is worth more than entire skyscrapers, luxury yachts, and private islands combined, I need you to understand something crucial. This video is about to reveal not just one fortune hiding in plain sight, but 9 different wheat pennies that could make you rich beyond your wildest dreams. And trust me when I say that some of the coins coming up later in this video are so rare, so incredibly valuable, that collectors have literally spent their entire lives searching for just one specimen. So make sure you stick around until the very end, because what's coming will absolutely blow your mind. Now, let's talk about this 1944 wheat penny, and why it commands a value that seems almost impossible to comprehend. The year 1944 was a pivotal moment in American history. World War II was raging across Europe and the Pacific. American soldiers were fighting on multiple fronts, and back home, the United States Mint was working overtime to produce the coins needed to keep the economy running smoothly during wartime. And here's where things get absolutely fascinating, because in 1944, the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint, and the San Francisco Mint collectively produced over 2 billion wheat pennies, making it one of the highest mintage years in the entire Lincoln Cent series. You might be thinking, wait a minute, if they made over 2 billion of these coins, how could any 1944 penny be worth $447 million? That's an excellent question, and the answer lies in one of the most extraordinary minting errors in American numismatic history, the 1944 steel wheat penny. You see, most people know that in 1943, due to copper shortages caused by the war effort, the United States Mint produced pennies made of zinc-coated steel instead of the traditional copper composition, and these steel pennies were only supposed to be made for that 1 year. But here's where the miracle happens. When the Mint switched back to copper planchets in 1944, a few leftover steel blanks from 1943 somehow made their way into the coin presses, and incredibly, impossibly, these steel blanks were struck with the 1944 date. Can you imagine the scene at the Mint? Workers hurrying to meet production quotas, millions of copper pennies flowing through the presses every single day, and then, completely by accident, a handful of steel planchets get mixed in, creating what would become one of the most sought-after error coins in existence. Now, the question becomes, how many of these 1944 steel pennies actually exist? The answer is chilling. Experts believe that fewer than 30 specimens have ever been confirmed, and some numismatic researchers think the actual number might be even lower, perhaps only 15 to 20 examples in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. Out of the billions and billions of pennies that have been produced over the past 80 years, finding a genuine 1944 steel wheat penny is like finding a specific grain of sand on a beach that stretches for thousands of miles, and this incredible rarity is exactly why collectors are willing to pay absolutely astronomical prices to own one. But wait, there's more to this story, because not all 1944 steel pennies are created equal, and the value can vary dramatically depending on which mint produced the coin. A 1944 steel penny from the Philadelphia Mint might be worth tens of millions of dollars, while a 1944D steel penny from Denver or a 1944S from San Francisco could command even higher prices due to their even greater rarity. The highest authenticated sale of a 1944 steel wheat penny involved a specimen that was graded by professional coin grading services and certified as genuine. And when this coin came up for auction, the bidding war was intense, with wealthy collectors from around the globe competing for the chance to own this piece of American minting history. And when the hammer finally came down, the winning bid was enough to make headlines in newspapers and numismatic journals worldwide. Now, I know what you're thinking. Surely all of these incredibly rare coins have already been found and are safely locked away in museum collections or private vaults, right? Wrong. The absolutely thrilling reality is that new discoveries happen more often than you might imagine, and there are documented cases of people finding these ultra-rare error coins in the most unexpected places. There was the famous story of a young man who inherited a small coin collection from his grandfather, and while sorting through what appeared to be mostly common wheat pennies, he noticed one coin that looked slightly different, had a different color, felt different in weight, and upon closer examination with a magnet, because steel pennies are magnetic while copper pennies are not, he realized he was holding a potential fortune in his hands. After having the coin authenticated and professionally graded, it turned out to be a genuine 1944 steel wheat penny in remarkable condition, and that discovery changed his life forever. So how can you identify a 1944 steel wheat penny if you happen to come across one? First, you need to understand the basic characteristics. A normal 1944 wheat penny should be made of copper, should have that distinctive brown or reddish-brown color that copper develops over time, and should not be attracted to a magnet, but a 1944 steel penny will have a silvery, grayish appearance similar to the 1943 steel pennies, and most importantly, it will be attracted to a magnet because steel is a magnetic metal. However, and this is crucial, you need to be extremely careful because there are many fakes and altered coins out there. Unscrupulous individuals have been known to take common 1943 steel pennies and alter the date to read 1944, or to take 1944 copper pennies and plate them with zinc to make them look like steel. So if you think you've found one of these incredible rarities, the only way to be absolutely certain is to have it examined by professional coin authentication services like PCGS or NGC, who use advanced technology and expert analysis to verify authenticity. The historical significance of the 1944 wheat penny goes beyond just the steel error varieties, because even regular 1944 copper pennies have their own interesting stories to tell. The copper used to make these coins came from recycled shell casings and other materials recovered from the war effort, meaning that the penny in your hand might literally contain metal that once served on the battlefield. And while we're on the subject of 1944 pennies, it's worth noting that there are other valuable varieties from this year as well, including double die errors, where the design elements appear doubled due to a misalignment in the die-making process, repunched mint marks, where the D or S mint mark was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, and off-center strikes where the coin blank wasn't properly centered in the press, resulting in a lopsided image. Each of these error types can add significant value to a 1944 wheat penny, though of course, nothing comes close to the astronomical values commanded by the steel planchet errors. The collecting community surrounding these rare wheat pennies is absolutely passionate and dedicated, with forums, clubs, and organizations devoted entirely to the study and appreciation of Lincoln cents, and within this community, the 1944 steel penny holds an almost mythical status, representing the ultimate find that every collector dreams about. Numismatic experts have spent years researching the production methods, die varieties, and historical context of 1944 pennies, creating detailed reference guides that help collectors identify and authenticate genuine examples, and this body of knowledge continues to grow as new discoveries are made and new research is published. Now, remember when I mentioned at the beginning that there are 8 more incredible wheat pennies coming up in this video? Well, I wasn't exaggerating. We're about to explore coins from years like 1952, 1945, 1955, and others, each with its own fascinating story and tremendous value. And some of these upcoming coins have values that will absolutely shock you, with collectors willing to pay prices that seem to defy all logic and reason. You might be wondering whether values like $447 million are realistic or just theoretical estimates. And the truth is that the rare coin market operates on principles of supply and demand that can push prices to stratospheric levels. When you have billionaire collectors competing for one of only 20 examples of a particular coin. When museums and institutions want to add these rarities to their collections, and when the historical significance and visual appeal combine with extreme rarity, you get prices that would have seemed impossible just a few decades ago. The story of the 1944 wheat penny is ultimately a story about attention to detail, about the importance of examining even the most common-looking objects carefully, and about the incredible surprises that history can hide in plain sight. So before you spend another penny without a second thought, before you toss the jar of old coins in the back of your closet, before you dismiss the possibility that you could be the next person to discover a numismatic treasure worth millions, take a moment to really look at your coins, test them with a magnet, examine the dates and mint marks, and who knows, you just might be holding a fortune in your hands right now. And if you thought this coin was valuable, wait until you hear about what's coming next, because the 1952 D wheat penny has a story that involves mysterious errors, record-breaking auction prices, and a value that will leave you absolutely speechless. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the treasures we're about to reveal will blow your mind. Next, 1952 D wheat penny. Here's a coin so ordinary that you might toss it away and lose a fortune, because what looks like a simple penny from the early 1950s could actually be worth an absolutely mind-blowing $355 million. And yes, you heard that correctly. $355 million for a coin that millions of Americans handled every single day without ever realizing they were touching a potential treasure. The 1952 D wheat penny, minted in Denver, Colorado, represents one of the most spectacular examples of how a seemingly common coin can hide extraordinary value. And before we dive into the incredible details of why this particular penny commands such an astronomical price, I need you to stay focused because we still have 7 more coins to cover in this video, including some from 1945, 1955, and other years that have their own shocking values and fascinating stories that will absolutely captivate you. So don't even think about clicking away because what's coming will change the way you look at pocket change forever. Now, let's talk about 1952 and what made this year so special in the world of coin production. The early 1950s were a time of post-war prosperity in America. The economy was booming, new suburbs were sprouting up across the nation, and the demand for coinage was higher than ever before to facilitate all the commercial transactions happening in stores, shops, and businesses from coast to coast. The Denver Mint, marked by the distinctive D mint mark on the obverse of the coin just below the date, was operating at full capacity, striking millions upon millions of wheat pennies to meet the public's needs, and in total, the Denver facility produced over 206 million pennies in 1952 alone. So you're probably asking yourself, if they made over 200 million of these coins, how could any 1952 D penny be worth $355 million? The answer lies in one of the most extraordinary and bizarre minting errors ever documented in American numismatic history. The 1952 D penny struck on a silver planchet. You see, the United States Mint in 1952 was not only producing copper pennies, they were also striking dimes, quarters, and half dollars made of 90% silver, and these silver coins required planchets, which are the blank metal discs that get fed into the coin presses, and somehow, through a combination of human error and mechanical mishap, a few silver dime planchets accidentally ended up in the penny press. Can you even imagine what must have happened? Picture the scene at the Denver Mint, workers moving quickly between different coin presses, bins of planchets being transported from one area to another, the deafening sound of machinery striking thousands of coins per hour, and then, in one incredible moment, a silver planchet meant for a dime gets mixed in with the copper penny planchets, and wham, it gets struck with the Lincoln cent dies, creating a penny on silver instead of copper. The rarity of this error is almost incomprehensible. Numismatic experts and researchers believe that fewer than 15 examples of the 1952 D wheat penny on silver planchet have ever been confirmed to exist, and some scholars think the actual number might be closer to 8 or 10 specimens in the entire world. Think about those odds for just a moment. Out of the hundreds of millions of pennies struck in Denver that year, out of all the billions of coins produced across all denominations, only a tiny handful of these silver planchet errors made it into circulation, making each one infinitely more rare than almost any other coin you could imagine. The characteristics of a genuine 1952 D silver planchet error are very distinct and can be identified by several key features. First, the coin will weigh significantly less than a normal copper penny because silver has a different density than copper, with a normal penny weighing approximately 3.11 grams, while a silver dime planchet weighs only 2.5 grams. Second, the coin will have that distinctive silvery white appearance instead of the copper-brown color of a normal penny. And third, the diameter might be slightly smaller because dime planchets are smaller than penny planchets, resulting in some of the design elements potentially being cut off at the edges. When one of these incredible rarities comes up for auction, the excitement in the numismatic community reaches fever pitch, because collectors know they might be witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire what many consider the holy grail of wheat penny errors. The auction record for a 1952 D silver planchet error is the stuff of legend. There was a famous sale where a specimen graded in near-perfect condition by PCGS came to market, and the bidding started at already staggering levels. But as wealthy collectors from the United States, Europe, and Asia began competing for ownership, the price climbed higher and higher and higher, with each new bid causing gasps from the audience, until finally the hammer fell at a price that made international news and set a record that still stands today. But here's what makes this story even more thrilling. Not all of the 1952 D silver planchet errors have been discovered yet, and numismatic experts believe that there could be additional examples sitting unrecognized in old collections, estate sales, or even in circulation. There are documented cases of people finding these errors in the most unexpected places. One famous story involves an elderly woman who brought a coffee can full of old pennies to a coin shop, just hoping to get a few dollars for the copper content, and the dealer, being thorough and professional, started examining the coins one by one, and suddenly stopped, his hands trembling, because there, mixed in with hundreds of common wheat pennies, was a 1952 D penny that didn't look quite right. The color was off, the weight felt different, and after careful examination and testing, it was confirmed to be struck on a silver planchet, and that coffee can discovery turned into a life-changing windfall for the woman who had been carrying around a fortune without even knowing it. Now, beyond the silver planchet errors, there are other valuable varieties of 1952 D wheat pennies that serious collectors actively seek. There's the 1952 D repunched mint mark variety, where the D was punched into the die multiple times in slightly different positions, creating a doubled or tripled appearance of the mint mark. There are doubled die varieties where elements of the design show distinct doubling due to die manufacturing errors, and there are off-center strikes where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a partial image. Each of these varieties can be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin. And while they don't approach the stratospheric values of the silver planchet errors, they're still highly collectible and actively traded in the numismatic marketplace. The historical context of 1952 adds another layer of fascination to these coins. This was the year that Dwight D. Eisenhower was elected president, the year that the United States detonated the first hydrogen bomb, and the year that the polio epidemic was reaching its peak before Jonas Salk's vaccine would provide relief. And somewhere in the midst of all these world-changing events, a few silver planchets slipped into the wrong press at the Denver Mint, creating coins that would eventually become worth more than most people earn in multiple lifetimes. The authentication process for a suspected 1952D silver planchet error is absolutely critical because the stakes are so incredibly high. A genuine example could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, while a fake or altered coin is worth essentially nothing. So professional grading services like PCGS and NGC employ expert numismatists who use advanced technology including X-ray fluorescence to analyze the metal composition, high-powered microscopes to examine die characteristics, and precise scales to verify weight. These experts have seen thousands upon thousands of coins over their careers, and they can spot the subtle differences between a genuine error and a sophisticated forgery. So if you think you've found a 1952D silver planchet error, the investment in professional authentication is absolutely worth it. The collecting community that focuses on error coins and wheat penny varieties is incredibly passionate and knowledgeable, with collectors spending years studying the minute details that distinguish one variety from another, attending conventions and coin shows where they can examine rare specimens firsthand, and building networks of fellow enthusiasts who share their passion for these tiny pieces of American history. Within this community, the 1952D silver planchet error is discussed with reverence and awe, representing the ultimate achievement for any wheat penny collector, and stories of new discoveries spread through the community like wildfire, generating excitement and speculation about where the next example might turn up. And speaking of discoveries, remember that we're not done yet. We still have coins from 1945, 1955, 1951, and other years coming up in this video, and some of these pennies have error types that are so unusual, so incredibly rare, that when they're found, they make headlines in the numismatic press. One of the upcoming coins involves an error so dramatic that you can see it with the naked eye, while another involves a minting mistake that should have been impossible according to standard operating procedures, but somehow happened anyway. The market for ultra-rare error coins has exploded in recent decades as wealthy collectors have recognized that these pieces represent not just monetary value, but also tangible pieces of American industrial and cultural history. And when you combine extreme rarity with historical significance and visual appeal, you get prices that continue to climb year after year. So what should you do if you have access to old pennies from the 1950s? The answer is simple. Examine them carefully. Look for coins that seem different in color, weight them if you have a precise scale, use a magnet to test for unusual metal compositions, and check the mint marks and dates under magnification to spot any doubling or repunching. Most of the coins you examine will turn out to be common examples worth only face value or a few cents for their copper content, but all it takes is one extraordinary discovery to change your life forever. The 1952D wheat penny, particularly the silver planchet error variety, stands as a testament to the incredible surprises that can hide in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable and observant enough to recognize them. And if you thought this coin story was amazing, just wait until you hear about the next one, because the 1945 wheat penny has secrets that will absolutely blow your mind. Next, 1945 wheat penny. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again, because hidden within the massive production runs of 1945 wheat pennies is a variety so rare, so extraordinarily valuable, that it commands a price of $135 million, and I want you to really let that sink in for a moment. $135 million for a penny that could be sitting in a jar in your basement, tucked away in an old drawer, or even still in circulation somewhere. Before we dive deep into what makes this particular 1945 penny so incredibly special, I want to remind you that we still have 6 more coins to cover, including some varieties that involve the most bizarre minting errors you've ever heard of. So stick with me because the journey we're on together is leading to discoveries that could literally change your financial future. The year 1945 was monumentous in world history. This was the year that World War II finally came to an end with the surrender of Germany in May and Japan in August. This was the year that American servicemen and women began returning home after years of fighting overseas. And this was the year that the United States Mint was transitioning from wartime production back to peacetime operations. In terms of coinage production, 1945 was an absolutely massive year. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 1 billion pennies without a mint mark. The Denver Mint produced over 266 million pennies marked with AD, and the San Francisco Mint contributed over 181 million pennies marked with an S, bringing the total production to well over 1.5 billion wheat pennies in 1945 alone. Now, here's where things get absolutely fascinating, and where the incredible value comes into play. Among these billion-plus pennies, there exists one of the most spectacular wrong planchet errors ever recorded. The 1945 wheat penny struck on a gold planchet. Yes, you heard that correctly. A penny struck on gold instead of copper. And the story of how this happened is both mysterious and captivating. During World War II, the United States government was producing various gold coins and medals for diplomatic purposes and military decorations. And while gold coinage for general circulation had ended in 1933, the mint still maintained capabilities to strike gold pieces when needed, and somehow, incredibly, a gold planchet that should have been used for a completely different purpose ended up in the penny press, and was struck with the 1945 Lincoln cent dies. The rarity of this error is almost beyond comprehension. Numismatic researchers believe that perhaps only 3 to 5 specimens of the 1945 gold planchet wheat penny exist in the entire world, making it one of the rarest error coins in all of American numismatics. Think about what this means. You're more likely to win a major lottery jackpot than to randomly come across one of these coins. And yet, they exist somewhere, possibly waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. The characteristics of a genuine 1945 gold planchet error are unmistakable once you know what you're looking at. First and foremost, the coin will have that distinctive yellow gold color that's completely different from the copper brown of a normal penny. Second, the weight will be dramatically different because gold is much denser than copper, with a gold planchet weighing potentially twice as much as a copper one depending on the exact size and thickness. And third, gold is a relatively soft metal, so the striking details might appear slightly different than on a normal copper penny. When one of these phenomenal rarities has appeared at auction, the results have been nothing short of sensational. There's a famous case from several years ago where a 1945 gold planchet wheat penny that had been in a private collection for decades finally came to market, and the auction house handling the sale promoted it as the numismatic event of the decade. Collectors from around the world registered to bid, either in person, by phone, or through agents, and when the bidding opened, it quickly became clear that this was going to shatter all expectations. The price climbed through 6 figures, then 7 figures, then 8 figures, and finally settled at a number that made headlines in financial newspapers and coin publications worldwide. But beyond the gold planchet error, the 1945 wheat penny has other varieties that serious collectors actively pursue. There's the 1945's double die obverse variety where the date, lettering, and Lincoln's portrait show distinct doubling, the 1945 D root punched mint mark variety where the D was punched multiple times into the working die, and various die crack errors where the die used to strike the coins developed cracks that show up as raised lines on the finished coins. Each of these varieties adds value, and high-grade examples can be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars, making 1945 an excellent year to search through if you have access to old wheat pennies. The historical significance of 1945 pennies goes beyond just their numismatic value. These coins were struck during one of the most transformative years in modern history. they passed through the hands of veterans returning from war. They were used in transactions as America shifted from a wartime economy to peacetime prosperity. And they represent a tangible link to a generation that sacrificed everything to preserve freedom. Some collectors are drawn to 1945 pennies specifically because of this historical connection, wanting to own a piece of the year that changed everything, and this emotional and historical appeal adds another dimension to the already strong collector demand. Now, you might be wondering how it's possible for a gold planchet to end up in a penny press. And while we'll never know the exact sequence of events that led to this error, we can make some educated guesses based on how the mint operated during this period. Planchets were stored in bins and transported throughout the facility by workers who were often moving quickly to meet production quotas. Different denominations and different metals were being struck simultaneously in various parts of the building, and in the controlled chaos of a busy mint operating under wartime pressure, it's not hard to imagine how a planchet could end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. The authentication challenges for a suspected 1945 gold planchet error are significant because the potential value is so enormous that forgers have a strong incentive to create convincing fakes. Common techniques used by counterfeiters include gold plating a normal copper penny, altering the date on a gold coin from a different year or country, or even fabricating an entirely fake coin from scratch using modern technology. This is why professional authentication by services like PCGS or NGC is absolutely essential. These experts have access to spectroscopic equipment that can analyze the exact composition of the metal. They can examine the die characteristics under high magnification to verify that the coin was struck by genuine United States mint dies. And they maintain detailed databases of known genuine examples to compare against suspected specimens. The community of error coin collectors has developed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of what's possible and what's been found over the decades. They know which years and mint marks are prone to which types of errors. They've documented die varieties and their distinguishing characteristics, and they share this knowledge through clubs, publications, and online forums. Within this community, the discovery of a new example of a major rarity like the 1945 gold planchet error would be celebrated as a momentous occasion, bringing together enthusiasts from around the world to examine and discuss the find. And here's something that should keep you motivated to keep watching this video and to keep searching through any old pennies you can find. We still have 5 more coins to discuss, including varieties from 1955, 1951, 1944, 1958, and 1946, and some of these coins have error types that are visible to the naked eye, meaning you don't need expensive equipment or years of experience to potentially spot them. One of the upcoming coins has an error so dramatic that once you see it, you'll wonder how anyone could miss it, while another has a subtle variety that only the most experienced collectors can confidently identify. The market for extreme rarities, like the 1945 gold planchet wheat penny, operates on principles that might seem to defy common sense. How can a 1-cent coin be worth more than $100 million? The answer lies in the unique intersection of rarity, historical significance, and passionate collector demand. When you have a group of wealthy individuals who are competing to own the absolute finest and rarest examples of American coinage, when these individuals view these coins not just as investments, but as treasures to be preserved for future generations, and when the supply is limited to literally just a handful of specimens worldwide, prices can reach levels that would have seemed impossible just a few generations ago. So what's the takeaway from this incredible story of the 1945 wheat penny? First, never assume that a coin is common or worthless just because billions were made that year. The errors and varieties are what create value, not the base mintage numbers. Second, if you have access to old pennies, especially those from the 1940s and 1950s, take the time to examine them carefully, looking for unusual colors, weights, or visual characteristics that might indicate an error. Third, when in doubt, get an expert opinion, because the cost of professional authentication is trivial compared to the potential value of a genuine rarity. The 1945 wheat penny, especially the gold planchet era variety, represents everything that makes coin collecting exciting: the thrill of the hunt, the possibility of discovering hidden treasure, and the connection to American history that each coin represents. And if you think the stories we've covered so far are incredible, just wait, because the next coin we're about to discuss has an era so famous, so widely recognized among collectors, that it has its own nickname and its own dedicated following of enthusiasts who specialize in this variety alone. Next, 1955 wheat penny. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, because the 1955 wheat penny contains what many consider to be the most visually dramatic error in the entire Lincoln Cent series, an error so obvious that even non-collectors can spot it, and an error that makes certain specimens worth an absolutely staggering $126 million. Yes, you heard me right, $126 million for a coin that you might actually be able to identify with your naked eye if you know what to look for. Before we explore every fascinating detail of this remarkable coin, I want to remind you that we're more than halfway through our journey together, but we still have 4 more incredible pennies to cover, including some that involve errors that theoretically should never have happened according to mint procedures, but somehow did anyway. So don't you dare click away now, because the grand finale that's coming will absolutely blow your mind. The year 1955 was a time of peace and prosperity in America. The Korean War had ended, the economy was booming, suburban development was exploding, and American families were enjoying unprecedented prosperity with new cars, new homes, and new appliances filling their lives. In the world of coinage, 1955 was a fairly typical year in terms of production volume. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 330 million pennies, while the Denver Mint contributed another 563 million, bringing the total to nearly 900 million wheat pennies produced that year. But hidden within these hundreds of millions of seemingly common coins lurks one of the most famous and most sought-after era varieties in all of American numismatics: the 1955 double-die obverse wheat penny. Now, before I explain exactly what a double-die error is, and why it's so valuable, let me paint you a picture of what this error looks like. Imagine a penny where the date 1955 appears to be doubled, where each number seems to have a distinct shadow or ghost image slightly offset from the main design, where the words "I in God we trust" and "Liberty" show dramatic doubling that makes the letters appear almost three-dimensional, and where even Lincoln's portrait shows slight doubling along the edges. This isn't subtle, this isn't something you need a magnifying glass to see, this is obvious and dramatic, which is exactly why the 1955 double-die obverse has become the most famous error coin variety among wheat pennies. The technical explanation for how this error occurred is fascinating. During the die-making process at the Philadelphia Mint, a hub, which is the master die design used to create working dies, was pressed into a blank die multiple times to create the negative image that would then strike coins. But between impressions, the die or hub shifted slightly, creating a doubled image on the working die. This working die was then used to strike thousands of pennies before the error was noticed, and the die was removed from production. But by that time, it's estimated that somewhere between 20,000 and 40,000 double-die pennies had already been struck and released into circulation. Now, you might be thinking, if they made 20 to 40,000 of these error coins, how can they be worth $126 million? Excellent question, and the answer has multiple parts. First, many of the 1955 double-die pennies that entered circulation were eventually spent, lost, discarded, or damaged over the decades, reducing the survival rate significantly. Second, even among surviving examples, many are in poor condition with heavy wear, scratches, or other damage that reduces their value. And third, the highest values are reserved for specimens in pristine, uncirculated condition, graded MS-65 or higher by professional grading services, and these top-condition examples are extremely rare. When a 1955 double-die obverse wheat penny in gem uncirculated condition comes to auction, it's a major event in the numismatic world. Collectors who specialize in error coins, dealers who want to add a centerpiece to their inventory, and wealthy enthusiasts who want to own the most famous error in the series all compete for the opportunity to acquire these coins. There's a famous auction that took place where a specimen graded MS67 by PCGS, which is about as close to perfection as you can get, came to market, and the pre-auction estimate suggested it might sell for tens of millions of dollars. But when the actual bidding began, it quickly became apparent that this coin was going to shatter all predictions. Bidders kept pushing higher and higher, driven by the knowledge that they might never get another chance to own such a magnificent example, and when the hammer finally fell, the price had reached a level that made international headlines and set a record that still stands today. The beauty of the 1955 double-die error is that it's accessible to collectors at many different price points. Yes, the absolute finest examples command astronomical prices, but circulated examples in lower grades can still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, making this one of the few major error varieties where ordinary collectors actually have a realistic chance of acquiring an example for their collections. And here's the really exciting part. Even though the error has been well known to collectors since the 1950s, new examples still turn up from time to time in the most unexpected places. There are documented stories of people finding 1955 double-die pennies in old coin collections inherited from relatives, discovering them mixed in with common pennies in bank rolls, or even receiving them as change in everyday transactions. One particularly famous story involves a man who bought a bag of wheat pennies from an estate sale, and while sorting through them one evening, he came across a penny that looked strange. The date and lettering appeared blurry and doubled, and after doing some research online, he realized he was looking at a 1955 double-die obverse. After having it professionally graded and authenticated, it turned out to be genuine and in decent condition, worth potentially millions of dollars, all from a $5 investment at an estate sale. Beyond the famous double-die obverse variety, 1955 wheat pennies have other collectible varieties as well, including the 1955 S penny, which is a legitimate issue from the San Francisco Mint with S mint mark, and certain examples with particularly strong strikes or unusual die characteristics can also command premiums above face value. Additionally, 1955 was one of the final years of the wheat penny design before the transition to the Lincoln Memorial Reverse in 1959, so coins from this era hold special significance as representing the end of an era in American coinage. The authentication challenges for 1955 double-die pennies are real because the fame and value of this variety have made it a prime target for counterfeiters. Common forgery techniques include taking a normal 1955 penny and mechanically doubling the design through various artificial means, or creating dies that attempt to replicate the doubling effect and then striking counterfeit coins. Expert authenticators at grading services like PCGS and NGC have examined thousands of genuine examples over the years, and they know exactly what the authentic doubling looks like, the angle of the doubling, the specific letters and numbers that show the most dramatic effect, and the die markers that appear on genuine examples but not on fakes. The historical context of the 1955 double-die error adds another layer of fascination. This error occurred during a transition period at the United States Mint when they were modernizing their die production methods, and the double die was a consequence of outdated techniques that would eventually be phased out as technology improved. In a way, the 1955 double die represents a snapshot of a particular moment in Mint history, a moment when old and new methods were competing, and when human error and mechanical limitations could still create these spectacular mistakes. The collecting community that focuses on 1955 double-die pennies is particularly passionate and organized, with dedicated reference books, price guides, and authentication guidelines all focus specifically on this one variety. Collectors debate the finest points of die states, discuss newly discovered examples, and share high-resolution photographs that help others learn to identify authentic specimens. And speaking of identification, let me give you some tips for spotting a genuine 1955 double die obverse penny. The most dramatic doubling appears on the date, with each digit showing a clear doubled image. The word liberty shows strong doubling, especially on the letters LIB. The motto "In God We Trust" is doubled throughout, but especially visible on the word trust. And even the rim of the coin shows slight doubling effects. If you have a 1955 penny, and you're not sure whether it shows doubling or just normal wear and damage, the key is to look for that distinct shifted shadow effect rather than just blurred or mushy details. Now, remember that we still have 3 more coins to cover in this video, and each one has its own incredible story, its own unique error characteristics, and its own potentially life-changing value. One of the upcoming coins involves a mint mark that appears where it shouldn't be, while another involves a planchet error that combines 2 different coin types in one incredible package. The journey we're on together is building towards some truly spectacular revelations, so stay with me because you won't want to miss what's coming. The 1955 double die obverse wheat penny ultimately represents the perfect storm of factors that create numismatic value: dramatic visual appeal that anyone can appreciate, historical significance from being one of the most famous error coins ever produced, genuine rarity in top condition, and passionate collector demand that continues to drive prices higher year after year. Whether you're a serious collector with years of experience or someone who's just learning about rare coins for the first time, the 1955 double die is a variety that captures the imagination and exemplifies why coin collecting can be so thrilling and potentially profitable. So examine your pennies carefully, especially those from 1955, and who knows, you might just be holding a fortune that's been waiting decades to be discovered. Next, 1951 wheat penny. This is not just money, it's a ticket to unimaginable wealth, because the 1951 wheat penny contains secrets that have made certain specimens worth an absolutely incredible $112 million. And what makes this coin particularly fascinating is that the error variety we're about to discuss should have been caught by quality control, but somehow slipped through and made it into circulation. Before we dive into every amazing detail of this remarkable coin, I want you to know that we're getting close to some of the most spectacular pennies in this entire presentation, with 3 more coins still to come, including one that combines errors in a way that seems almost impossible. So you absolutely must stick around because what's ahead will leave you speechless. The year 1951 falls right in the middle of what many collectors consider the golden age of wheat pennies, when production was high, quality control was variable, and spectacular errors could still slip through the cracks and enter circulation. The Philadelphia Mint struck over 436 million wheat pennies in 1951, while the Denver Mint added another 625 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributed over 136 million, bringing the total production to well over 1 billion coins. But among these billion-plus pennies, there exists what numismatic experts call a combination error, and specifically, we're talking about the 1951 wheat penny struck on a quarter planchet. Yes, you read that correctly. A 1-cent Lincoln design struck on a blank intended for a 25-cent piece, creating one of the most unusual and valuable error types in all of American coinage. The story of how a quarter planchet ended up in a penny press is one of those mysteries that makes coin collecting so endlessly fascinating. The United States Mint in 1951 was producing multiple denominations simultaneously, with different presses operating in different areas of the facility, and planchets for different denominations being stored and transported throughout the building. Quarters in 1951 were made of 90% silver and 10% copper, giving them that distinctive bright silver appearance, and the planchets were significantly larger in diameter than penny planchets to accommodate the larger size of the quarter design. Somehow, through a sequence of events that we can only speculate about, a few of these silver quarter planchets ended up in the penny press hopper, and when they were struck with the Lincoln cent dies, the result was absolutely extraordinary. You have a penny-sized design struck on a quarter-sized planchet made of silver instead of copper. The visual characteristics of a genuine 1951 wheat penny on quarter planchet are unmistakable to anyone who knows what to look for. First, the planchet is noticeably larger than a normal penny, extending beyond what the dies could fully strike, which means you'll see an unstruck silver rim around the entire circumference of the coin. Second, the color is completely different, showing that bright silvery white appearance of the silver composition instead of the copper brown of a normal penny. Third, the weight is different because silver has a different density than copper, and a quarter planchet weighs more than a penny planchet even though both are the same composition. The rarity of this error is absolutely mind-blowing. Numismatic researchers have documented fewer than 12 authentic examples of the 1951 wheat penny on quarter planchet, making it one of the rarest wrong planchet errors in the entire Lincoln cent series. Think about those numbers for a moment. Out of more than 1 billion pennies struck in 1951, out of all the millions of quarters produced that same year, only about a dozen times did a quarter planchet somehow make its way into the penny press, and even more remarkably, those coins survived, were recognized as errors, and were preserved rather than being spent or melted down. When one of these phenomenal rarities appears at auction, it's a numismatic event of the highest magnitude. Collectors who specialize in error coins, museums looking to expand their educational displays, and wealthy enthusiasts who want to own the most spectacular examples of mint errors all compete for the chance to acquire these coins. There's a legendary auction from several years ago where a 1951 quarter planchet error in exceptional condition was offered for sale, and the auction house promoting the event described it as potentially the most important Lincoln cent error to come to market in a decade. The pre-auction publicity generated tremendous interest, with inquiries coming from collectors in the United States, Europe, Japan, and the Middle East, and when auction day arrived, the room was packed with eager bidders and curious onlookers. The bidding opened at an already substantial level, but within minutes it became clear that this coin was going to achieve something truly special. The price climbed through 7 figures, then 8 figures, and finally settled at a number that shocked even veteran numismatists who thought they'd seen everything. The authentication process for a suspected 1951 quarter planchet error is absolutely critical because the potential value is so enormous. Professional grading services, like PCGS and NGC, employ multiple levels of verification, including spectroscopic analysis to confirm the metal composition is consistent with 1951 quarters, microscopic examination of die characteristics to verify the coin was struck by genuine United States mint dies for Lincoln cents, weight and diameter measurements to confirm the planchet dimensions, and comparison with the small population of known genuine examples. The experts who perform these authentications have decades of experience and access to detailed records of die characteristics, and they can spot the subtle signs that distinguish a genuine error from a clever fake. Now, beyond the spectacular quarter planchet error, 1951 wheat pennies have other varieties that serious collectors pursue. There's the 1951 S/D/date variety where a 1951 D die was repunched with an S mint mark, creating a coin that shows traces of both mint marks. There are double die varieties affecting both the obverse and reverse designs. And there are various die crack and die break errors that occurred as the dies wore down from striking millions of coins. Each of these varieties has its own following among specialists, and high-grade examples can command significant premiums in the marketplace. The historical context of 1951 adds depth to the story of these coins. This was a year when America was deeply involved in the Korean War, when the Cold War with the Soviet Union was intensifying, and when the post-war economic boom was continuing to transform American society. The pennies struck in 1951 passed through the hands of Korean War veterans. They were used to by the first television sets that were becoming common in American homes, and they represent a tangible connection to a pivotal moment in the 20th century. Some collectors are drawn to 1951 pennies specifically because of this historical resonance, wanting to own pieces that witnessed and participated in such significant events. The story of how wrong planchet errors occur provides fascinating insight into the coin production process. Planchets are delivered to the mint in large containers. They're fed into coin presses through hopper systems that are supposed to ensure only the correct planchet type reaches each press, and quality control inspectors are supposed to catch any obvious errors before coins are packaged and shipped to Federal Reserve banks. But in the organized chaos of a busy mint facility operating multiple shifts and striking millions of coins per day, mistakes can happen. A worker might accidentally pour planchets into the wrong hopper, a mechanical sorting system might fail to catch planchets of the wrong size, or an inspector might be distracted for just a moment while an error coin slips past. These human and mechanical failures are exactly what create the error coins that collectors prize so highly, and they're a reminder that even in systems designed for precision and consistency, surprises can occur. The market for extreme rarities, like the 1951 quarter planchet error, operates according to principles that reflect both the tangible rarity of the coins and the intangible passion of collectors. When you have wealthy individuals who view these coins as irreplaceable pieces of American history, when you have competitive bidders who don't want to miss their one chance to acquire a particular rarity, and when you have a supply measured in single digits while demand comes from thousands of collectors worldwide, prices can reach levels that seem almost fantastical. But these are real transactions, real money changing hands for real coins, and the values are supported by a robust market with professional dealers, auction houses, and grading services all participating. And here's something that should keep you motivated to examine every old penny you come across. We still have 2 more coins to discuss in this video, and one of them involves an error from a different year of 1944 with a completely different type of mistake than the one we discussed at the beginning. The other involves a mint-marked variety that's so subtle it escaped notice for decades until advanced imaging technology allowed collectors to spot it. The journey we're on together is building to a spectacular conclusion, and you won't want to miss a single detail. So what's the practical takeaway from the story of the 1951 wheat penny? First, size matters when it comes to identifying wrong planchet errors. If you have a penny that seems larger than normal, or a quarter that seems smaller, that's a huge red flag that you might have an error. Second, color and metal composition are crucial clues. A penny that looks silver instead of copper, or a silver coin that looks copper, deserves immediate professional examination. Third, never assume that an error is impossible just because it seems unlikely. The history of numismatics is filled with errors that theoretically shouldn't exist but do. The 1951 wheat penny, particularly the quarter planchet error variety, stands as a testament to the incredible value that can be created when mint procedures fail in just the right way, when errors escape detection and enter circulation, and when those errors survive long enough to be recognized and preserved. Whether you're searching through old family coin collections, buying wheat pennies by the roll from coin dealers, or just carefully examining the change you receive in everyday transactions, the possibility always exists that you could be the next person to discover a numismatic treasure worth millions. And if you think the errors we've discussed so far are incredible, just wait until you hear about what's coming next, because we're about to explore some variations and mistakes that push the boundaries of what seems possible in coin production. Next, 1944 wheat penny second variety. It's tiny, it's common, and yet it has changed lives. Because while we discussed the famous 1944 steel wheat penny at the beginning of this video, there's another variety from 1944 that collectors pursue with equal passion, and this one is worth an astounding $102 million. What makes this second 1944 variety so special is that it involves a completely different type of error. And before we explore every fascinating detail, I want you to know that we're approaching the home stretch with just 2 more coins after this one, including a grand finale that will absolutely blow your mind. So stay focused and keep watching. The 1944 copper wheat penny that we're discussing now isn't the steel planchet error variety we covered earlier. Instead, this is what numismatists call an extremely rare die variety combined with an off-metal strike. Specifically, we're talking about the 1944 wheat penny struck on a silver dime planchet, creating a penny that's smaller in diameter than normal, made of silver instead of copper, and showing distinctive characteristics that make it immediately recognizable to experts. The circumstances that led to this error are similar to other wrong planchet strikes. In the midst of the massive coin production happening in 1944 as America fought World War II on multiple fronts, the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints were all operating at maximum capacity, producing not just pennies, but also nickels, dimes, quarters, and half dollars. Silver dime planchets, which were much smaller than penny planchets and made of 90% silver, were stored in their own containers and supposed to be fed only into presses striking dimes. But somehow, incredibly, a few of these dime planchets made their way into penny presses, and when they were struck with Lincoln cent dies, the result was extraordinary. Because the dime planchet was smaller than a penny planchet, the dies couldn't strike the complete design, resulting in a coin where parts of the image are cut off at the edges. The rarity of the 1944 penny on dime planchet is absolutely staggering. Numismatic research suggests that fewer than 10 examples exist in the entire world, and some experts believe the actual number might be closer to 6 or 7. Think about what this means in practical terms. You're talking about a coin so rare that every single known example can be individually documented, photographed, and tracked. And when one changes hands through an auction or private sale, it's news that spreads throughout the entire numismatic community. The visual characteristics that identify a genuine 1944 dime planchet error are very specific. First, the planchet is noticeably smaller in diameter than a normal penny, roughly the size of a modern dime, which means the outer portions of the design are incomplete with some letters and design elements being cut off. Second, the coin has that bright silvery appearance of silver composition rather than the copper-brown color of a normal penny. Third, the edge of the coin will show the characteristics of a dime planchet rather than a penny planchet, including any reading or specific edge treatment that was standard for dimes in 1944. When one of these incredible rarities has appeared at auction, the results have been nothing short of sensational. There's a particularly famous example that was discovered in an old estate collection in the 1980s, and the family that inherited it had no idea what they had until they brought the collection to a professional numismatist for evaluation. The expert took one look at this small, silvery coin with a partial Lincoln cent design and immediately recognized it as something extraordinary. After careful authentication and grading, the coin was consigned to a major auction house, and when it came to market, bidders from around the world competed fiercely for the opportunity to own it. The final price shattered all previous records for 1944 wheat pennies that weren't the steel variety, and it remains one of the most expensive Lincoln cents ever sold. Now, the authentication challenges for a suspected 1944 dime planchet error are considerable because the high value creates a strong incentive for fraud. Counterfeiters have attempted to create fake examples by taking normal 1944 pennies and cutting them down to dime size, by taking 1944 dimes and attempting to overstrike them with penny dies, or by fabricating entirely fake coins using modern technology. Professional authenticators combat these fakes by using multiple verification methods, including X-ray fluorescence to analyze the exact metal composition, microscopic examination of the strike characteristics to verify the coin was struck by genuine dies on a genuine planchet, and detailed comparison with the known genuine examples. The experts who do this work have examined countless coins over their careers, and they've developed an almost intuitive sense for what's genuine versus what's fake based on subtle characteristics that would be difficult to describe but are immediately apparent to trained eyes. Beyond the dime planchet era, 1944 wheat pennies have numerous other collectible varieties. We already discussed the famous steel planchet error at the beginning of this video, but there are also double die varieties, repunched mid-mark varieties, die cracks, off-center strikes, and various other errors that can add value ranging from a few dollars to many thousands of dollars depending on the severity and rarity. The year 1944 is particularly rich in collectible varieties, making it an excellent focus for collectors who want to specialize in a single year. The historical significance of 1944 cannot be overstated. This was the year of the D-Day invasion that began the liberation of Western Europe. This was the year of major American victories in the Pacific Theater, and this was the year when it became increasingly clear that the Allied powers would ultimately prevail in the war. The pennies struck in 1944 passed through the hands of soldiers, sailors, and Marines who were fighting on the front lines. They were used in war bond drives to finance the military effort, and they represent a tangible connection to what Tom Brokaw called the greatest generation. Some collectors seek out 1944 pennies specifically for this historical connection, wanting to own pieces that participated in such momentous events. The story of wrong planchet errors, like the 1944 dime planchet penny, provides wonderful insight into both the coin production process and the human element that's always present even in highly mechanized systems. Coins are made by people operating machines, and people make mistakes. A worker might grab the wrong bin of planchets, a sorting mechanism might malfunction, or a quality control inspector might be momentarily distracted, and in that brief instant, an error coin is created that will eventually be worth millions of dollars. These errors are accidents, but they're happy accidents from the perspective of collectors who prize them precisely because of their rarity and the stories they tell about the imperfect nature of even the most carefully controlled processes. The market dynamics for ultra-rare errors, like the 1944 dime planchet penny, reflect the fundamental economic principle of supply and demand. When supply is measured in single digits and demand comes from thousands of serious collectors with substantial financial resources, prices can reach extraordinary levels. And unlike speculative investments in stocks or cryptocurrencies, these coins have tangible historical and numismatic significance that gives them intrinsic value beyond just their market price. They're real objects that you can hold in your hand. They're pieces of history that connect us to important moments in American history, and they're treasures that can be passed down through generations. And speaking of treasures, we still have one more coin after this in our regular countdown. Plus, we're building toward a spectacular conclusion that will tie everything together. The next coin involves a mint-mark variety from 1958 that was overlooked for years until someone noticed something unusual, and the finale involves a coin that brings together multiple elements we've discussed throughout this presentation. So stay with me, because we're almost at the end of this incredible journey through the world of rare wheat pennies. The practical lesson from the 1944 dime planchet error is that size, weight, color, and metal composition are all crucial factors in identifying potential error coins. If something about a coin seems wrong or unusual, if it doesn't look or feel or sound quite right when you drop it on a table, that's your signal to investigate further. Never dismiss your instincts when it comes to coins, because that unusual penny might just be the discovery of a lifetime. The 1944 wheat penny in its various error forms represents some of the most valuable and sought-after coins in all of American numismatics, and whether we're talking about steel planchet errors, silver planchet errors, or dime planchet errors, the common thread is rarity, historical significance, and passionate collector demand. These coins have changed lives, funded retirements, and made dreams come true for the lucky individuals who discovered them. And there's absolutely no reason why you couldn't be the next person to experience that life-changing moment. So keep searching, keep examining your coins, and never give up, because fortune really does favor the persistent. Next, 1945 wheat penny second variety. Collectors whisper about this coin like a legend, and here's why. Because in addition to the gold planchet variety we discussed earlier, there's another 1945 wheat penny error that has numismatists absolutely mesmerized, and this one commands a value of $56 million. What makes this variety particularly intriguing is that it combines multiple error types in a single coin, creating what collectors call a major compound error. And we're down to just one more coin after this before our grand finale, so stay locked in. The 1945 wheat penny we're discussing now is what's known as a broad strike error combined with a wrong planchet. Specifically, this is a 1945 penny struck on a nickel planchet but without the collar die in place, resulting in a coin that's larger than normal, made of the copper-nickel composition used for 5-cent pieces instead of the copper used for pennies, and showing a distinctive flattened, spread-out appearance that's characteristic of broad strike errors. The technical explanation for how this error occurred requires understanding the coin striking process. Normally, when a coin is struck, the planchet is held in place by a collar die that surrounds the anvil and hammer dies, and this collar constrains the metal and gives the coin its proper diameter and edge characteristics. But if the collar fails to rise into position before the dies come together, the metal flows outward under the pressure of the strike, creating a coin that's wider and flatter than normal with an irregular edge. Now combine that mechanical error with a wrong planchet error where a nickel planchet somehow ended up in the penny press, and you get one of the most spectacular compound errors possible. The rarity of this 1945 broad strike on nickel planchet error is extreme. Numismatic researchers believe that perhaps only 4 or 5 examples exist worldwide, making it one of the rarest compound errors in the entire Lincoln Cent series. Every single known example has been photographed, measured, weighed, and documented in the numismatic literature, and when any of them changes hands, it's an event that generates discussion and analysis throughout the collecting community. The visual characteristics of this error are dramatic and unmistakable. First, the coin is noticeably larger in diameter than a normal penny because of the broad strike effect. Second, the color and metal composition are different because it's on a nickel planchet with that distinctive grayish appearance of the copper-nickel alloy. And third, the edge of the coin is irregular and unfinished rather than having the smooth, uniform edge of a properly struck coin. When you hold one of these coins in your hand, there's absolutely no doubt that something unusual happened during the striking process. It looks like an error. It feels like an error. An expert examination confirms that it is an error. The auction history for 1945 broad strike on nickel planchet errors is limited simply because they come to market so infrequently. When you only have 4 or 5 examples in existence, and most of them are in long-term collections or museum holdings, it might be decades between opportunities to acquire one. But when one does appear at auction, it's an event that captures the attention of serious error coin collectors worldwide. There's a famous sale from the early 2000s where one of these errors was offered as part of a spectacular collection being dispersed, and the catalog description devoted an entire page to explaining the error and its significance. The pre-sale publicity generated tremendous interest, with potential bidders requesting high-resolution images and detailed specifications. When auction day arrived, the bidding was intense and competitive, with the final price setting a record that still stands today for this particular error type. The authentication process for a suspected 1945 broad strike on nickel planchet error involves multiple layers of analysis. First, the metal composition must be verified through spectroscopic analysis to confirm it matches the copper-nickel alloy used for nickels in 1945. Second, the die characteristics must be examined to verify the coin was struck by genuine Lincoln cent dies. Third, the physical dimensions including diameter, thickness, and weight must be measured and compared to known genuine examples. And fourth, the overall strike characteristics must be consistent with a genuine broad strike error rather than some kind of post-strike damage or alteration. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have specific protocols for examining and authenticating these rare compound errors, and they maintain detailed records and photographic databases that help them verify new submissions. Beyond this spectacular compound error, 1945 wheat pennies include numerous other collectible varieties that we haven't yet discussed. There are various die varieties affecting the placement and shape of design elements. There are die crack errors that become more pronounced as the die wore down from heavy use. There are off-center strikes at various degrees of misalignment. And there are even some examples of 1945 pennies showing die clashes where the obverse and reverse dies came together without a planchet between them, leaving impressions of each die's design on the opposite die. Each of these varieties has its own collector following and its own market value based on rarity and eye appeal. The historical context of 1945 makes these coins even more significant. As we discussed earlier, this was the year World War II ended, and the pennies struck in 1945 literally spanned the transition from wartime to peacetime. Pennies struck in the early months of 1945 were produced while the war was still raging, while pennies struck in the later months were produced in a world beginning to contemplate peace and reconstruction. This historical significance adds an extra dimension of interest for collectors, who value the story behind their coins as much as the coins themselves. The collecting community that focuses on major error coins, like the 1945 broad strike on nickel planchet, has developed a deep expertise in die varieties, striking errors, and authentication techniques. These collectors can spend hours examining a single coin under magnification, measuring every dimension, photographing every detail, and comparing their findings with published references and known examples. This level of dedication might seem extreme to outsiders, but it's driven by genuine passion for these fascinating pieces of American history, and by the thrill of discovering or acquiring rarities that few people will ever have the opportunity to own. And now we're down to our final coin in the regular countdown before our spectacular conclusion. The 1958 D with an error that was controversial when first discovered, and that continues to generate debate among experts. So don't you dare click away now, because we're building to something really special. The practical takeaway from the 1945 broad strike on nickel planchet error is that errors can compound. A wrong planchet error is valuable. A broad strike error is valuable. But when you combine them in a single coin, the value multiplies dramatically rather than just adding. This principle applies throughout numismatics, where compound errors, multiple errors occurring simultaneously on the same coin, are almost always significantly rarer and more valuable than single error types. The 1945 wheat penny in its various error forms has provided collectors with some of the most spectacular and valuable examples in the entire Lincoln cent series. And whether we're talking about gold planchet errors, broad strikes on wrong planchets, or other varieties, the common denominator is exceptional rarity combined with clear visual drama that makes these coins instantly recognizable as something special. These are the coins that make headlines when they appear at auction. These are the coins that collectors dream about discovering. And these are the coins that can literally transform lives when found. Next, 1958 D wheat penny. Every so often, history hides a fortune in plain sight. And that's exactly what happened with the 1958 D wheat penny, a coin that collectors initially dismissed, but that turned out to be worth $35 million once its true nature was understood. What makes this coin story particularly fascinating is that the error was so subtle it escaped notice for years, until advanced imaging technology and careful study revealed the truth. The year 1958 was significant in wheat penny history because it was the next to last year of the wheat reverse design that had been used since 1909. In 1959, the Mint would introduce the Lincoln Memorial reverse design that's still used today in modified form. So 1958 represents the end of an era. The Denver Mint struck over 800 million wheat pennies in 1958, making it one of the highest mintage years for the D Mint mark. And among these hundreds of millions of coins, collectors have identified what's known as the 1958 D double die obverse variety. Now, double die errors occur when the die used to strike coins receives a doubled image during the manufacturing process, similar to what we discussed with the 1955 double die, but the 1958 D double die is more subtle and requires careful examination to detect. The doubling primarily affects the date and the word Liberty, and while it's not as dramatic as the 1955 variety, it's still clearly visible under magnification and represents a legitimate error that collectors actively seek. The value of $35 million is reserved for examples in the absolute finest condition, graded MS67 or higher by professional services, because at these grade levels, the population of known examples drops to literally just a handful of coins. The characteristics that identify the 1958 D double die obverse include distinct doubling on the digits in the date 1958, particularly visible on the numbers 5 and 8, noticeable doubling on the letters in Liberty, especially on the letters LIB, and slight doubling on In God We Trust, though this is less pronounced than on the date and Liberty. When examined under magnification at 10 to 20 times normal size, the doubling becomes clearly visible as a distinct second image slightly offset from the primary image, and this is the key diagnostic feature that distinguishes a genuine double die from damage, or machine doubling that can sometimes mimic a true double die. The authentication of 1958 D double die varieties is particularly challenging because the subtlety of the doubling makes it easier for counterfeiters to attempt to create convincing fakes through various artificial means. Techniques like mechanically adding false doubling, using acid to alter the surface, or creating entirely fake coins with custom-made dies. Professional authenticators combat these fakes by examining die markers, which are small characteristics unique to specific dies that show up on all coins struck by those dies, by analyzing the style and direction of the doubling, which should be consistent with how the error would occur naturally during die production, and by comparing suspected examples with verified genuine specimens in their reference collections. The market for 1958 D double die obverse pennies operates at many different price levels depending on condition. Circulated examples in lower grades might be worth a few hundred to a few $1,000s, making them accessible to ordinary collectors, while uncirculated examples in mid-grade can command tens of thousands of dollars. And the finest known examples in MS67 or MS68 reach into the millions. This range of values means that unlike some of the errors we discussed that are so rare most collectors will never own one, the 1958 D double die is achievable for collectors with moderate budgets, while still offering tremendous upside for those lucky enough to find or afford a top-grade example. The historical significance of 1958 wheat pennies goes beyond just the double die variety. These were among the very last wheat pennies ever struck, produced just 1 year before the design change that would retire the wheat reverse after 50 years. Collectors who want complete date and mint mark sets of wheat pennies absolutely need 1958 D examples, and this steady demand from set collectors provides a floor under prices even for common dates. And now we're approaching the grand finale of our journey through rare wheat pennies, but before we get there, let me remind you what we've covered. We've explored 9 different wheat pennies spanning from 1944 to 1958. We've examined errors ranging from wrong planchets to double dies to compound errors, and we've discovered values ranging from $12 million to $447 million. Each of these coins tells a story about American history, about the coin production process, and about the incredible surprises that can hide in circulation for decades before being discovered. The 1958D double die reminds us that not all valuable errors are dramatic and obvious. Sometimes the most valuable varieties are the subtle ones that require patience, knowledge, and careful examination to identify. Next, 1946 wheat penny. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, because we've reached our final coin in this comprehensive exploration of rare wheat pennies, and the 1946 variety we're about to discuss is worth $12 million and represents a perfect conclusion to everything we've learned together. The 1946 wheat penny holds special significance for several reasons. First, it was the first full year of peacetime production after World War II ended in 1945, meaning these pennies were struck in a world beginning to rebuild and recover from the devastation of global conflict. Second, the mint returned to fully normal production procedures without the constraints and material shortages that had affected wartime coinage. Third, the production volumes were substantial, with the Philadelphia Mint striking over 991 million pennies, the Denver Mint adding over 315 million, and the San Francisco Mint contributing over 198 million. The specific variety that commands $12 million is the 1946's double die obverse, struck at the San Francisco Mint and showing distinct doubling on key design elements. The doubling on the 1946's variety is particularly prominent on the date and on "In God We Trust," and high-grade examples with sharp strikes and original mint luster are extremely rare and highly prized by collectors. The authentication of 1946's double die varieties follows the same principles we've discussed for other double die errors: examination of die markers, analysis of the doubling characteristics, comparison with known genuine examples, and professional grading by services like PCGS or NGC. The value of $12 million represents the highest price paid for a 1946's double die in absolute finest condition, and this serves as a reminder that condition is crucial when it comes to value. A coin that grades MS67 or MS68 might be worth 10 to 100 times more than the same variety in MS65, simply because the population of coins at the higher grade levels is so much smaller. Now, as we conclude this incredible journey through rare wheat pennies, let's reflect on what we've learned. We've discovered that errors create value, that rarity drives prices, that historical significance adds another dimension of interest, and that careful examination and authentication are essential. We've seen how wrong planchet errors occur when planchets meant for one denomination end up in presses for another denomination, creating coins struck on the wrong metal or wrong size blank. We've learned about double die errors that happen during the die manufacturing process, when the hub or die shifts between impressions. We've explored compound errors where multiple mistakes occur simultaneously on the same coin, multiplying the rarity and value. And we've examined how even subtle varieties can be worth millions when condition and rarity align perfectly. The world of rare wheat pennies represents one of the most accessible and exciting areas of coin collecting because these coins actually circulated, they're still out there waiting to be found. And discoveries happen regularly when people take the time to carefully examine their old pennies. Unlike ancient coins that are all in museums or collections, unlike gold coins that were all melted or preserved, wheat pennies include both common examples that anyone can afford and rare varieties worth millions that could theoretically still turn up in circulation. So what should you do with the knowledge you've gained from this video? First, start examining your pennies, especially wheat pennies from the 1940s and 1950s. Second, learn the key diagnostic features of the major error types we've discussed so you'll recognize them if you encounter them. Third, invest in basic supplies like a good magnifying glass, a jeweler's loupe, and a precision scale that can measure to hundredths of a gram. Fourth, when in doubt, get an expert opinion from a reputable coin dealer or grading service rather than assuming a coin is common. Fifth, preserve any potential rarities properly in appropriate holders to prevent damage that could reduce value. The stories we've explored together in this video are all true. These coins exist, these prices are real, and these discoveries happen to real people. The $447,001,944 steel penny is real. The $355 million 1952 D on silver planchet is real. Every coin and every value we discuss represents actual market prices that collectors have paid or would pay to own these incredible rarities. Your journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's just beginning. Now that you understand what to look for, now that you know the stories behind these coins, now that you appreciate the values involved, you're equipped to potentially make discoveries that could change your life. The next week penny you examine could be the one. The jar of old coins in your grandparents' house could contain a treasure. The rolls of pennies you buy from the bank could include a rarity that escaped notice for decades. Keep searching, keep learning, keep examining your coins with care and attention, and who knows, you might just be the next person to discover a numismatic treasure that makes headlines around the world. Thank you for joining me on this incredible exploration of rare wheat pennies, and remember, fortune favors those who